Welcome to the Pocketnow Weekly. This week, scandals. OnePlus phones are having problems calling emergency numbers, and HTC's keyboard is serving people ads. We all love a bit of drama in our tech news coverage. Also, Bixby Voice is supposedly working now in North America, and might we see a sequel to the iPhone SE? Jaime Rivera drops by to help us unpack the top news stories of the week, so make sure you're charged and ready for episode 262 of the Pocketnow Weekly. Recorded July 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern, this weekly podcast is where we dissect and discuss those gadgets that make our lives mobile. Smartphones, tablets, and wearables. It's all the stuff you wished existed when you were a kid, and you never would have dreamed that your phone could reboot on you while dialing 911. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, senior editor at Pocketnow.com, blasting the signal from sunny Southern California. This week, joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Jaime Rivera, host of the Pocketnow Daily. How are you doing on this fine day today, sir?
Unmuting my microphone and saying hi. How are you? Thank you for having me. It is such a pleasure to be invited, even though that rarely happens.
We're both working busy schedules, trying to keep this Pocketnow beast fed, and whenever we can get you on, and also that we've got some news that I definitely want to unpack, just sort of the behind the scenes, the inner workings of Pocketnow, which I want to talk about at the end of the show. And you're a key component in making all of these things happen, so we definitely wanted to have you on for that.
Interesting. I feel flattered. Thank you.
Absolutely. And always, as always, plucky podcast producer Mr. Jules Wong will be frantically patching up holes to keep our show afloat. How's it going out there on the East Coast?
This show was compiled in just about 20 minutes from the time just before the podcast actually started. So congratulations to everyone on this show for making it happen.
We're flying by the seat of our pants. Exactly. Totally. Now, before we jump into more tech tomfoolery, we'd like to take a moment to thank this week's sponsor, who is Shutterstock. Now, content creators know that visuals they select really matter. Whether you need some great images for a single project or you have a consistent need for high-quality files, Shutterstock has a package for you. Each piece of content in their catalog is reviewed by Shutterstock curators, producing an exceptional collection of authentic imagery that's perfect for telling any story. An average of 150,000 new pieces of content are added every day, giving you an ever-growing selection to choose from. Don't miss out on a crucial element of marketing for your business or finishing your multimedia creation. Find the right visuals for your project. Small business owners on a tight budget will be delighted to know that Shutterstock is making it even easier to get started. For listeners of this show, you can get a 20% discount by heading over to shutterstock.com/weekly and signing up. Once again, that's shutterstock.com/weekly for your 20% discount. There's never been a better time to take your creative and marketing materials to the next level. So give Shutterstock a look, and we thank them for supporting the Pocketnow Weekly.
Indeed, we do. And if you want to support us here at the Pocketnow Weekly, obviously your listenership is appreciated, but especially on our weeks now that we're going live and you want to contribute something to the conversation, hit us up on Twitter, hashtag PNWeekly. I believe Some Gadget Guy, at Some Gadget Guy for Juan Carlos Bagnell, Jaime_Rivera for him, and I'm at Point Jules. So talk to us, and we'll get you a discussion of what's going on in mobile tech this week.
Well, and for folks that are listening to the show or watching the video after the fact, hit us up on the emails, that old-fashioned telecommunications setup where you can find us at podcast@pocketnow.com. We actually have some listener mail that we're going to cover since we have Jaime here, and he's much better at answering questions than I am.
Yeah, use your IMAP servers.
So you mean what Adam Lane says we should do? We should completely stop doing IM. We should stop doing instant messaging, and let's all go back to email. Adam Lane says that that's the best way to go.
He's insisted that for the longest time.
Yeah, I mean, but I keep coming back to what is a consistent way that I can reach someone, and texting and email just keep coming back as the platforms that I can most reliably get a hold of someone with. The Facebook messaging, with there are friends of mine who
I would totally agree with you if
message over Twitter.
Go ahead. I would totally agree with you if I didn't get 400 emails a day every time we go to IFA, CES, or MWC.
Right.
Well,
That is the problem.
Pitches are
No,
pitches.
that's definitely
the amount of
an issue.
spam we get, the closer we are to a show. Oh my God. So just email becomes unusable, like completely
it's all
unusable.
just noise. Yeah, definitely. I totally appreciate that there too, but there's way less memorization involved. Like, is this a WhatsApp friend? Is this a Line friend? Is this a Viber friend?
So
like,
wait a second.
How do
you
I
don't
reach
use
this
the
person?
BlackBerry Hub? You don't use the BlackBerry Hub?
You want to talk about noise? You know what? Isn't that so funny? Where we used to love this notion of this one-stop shop for all of our communication needs. Like HTC had a similar solution for a little while, didn't they? And in part of it was before Sense.
Yeah, it was before Sense, yes.
And then all of a sudden, this explosion in social media completely rendered that useless for the insane amount of content that even regular consumers now face with every single social media communication system, app, plugin, notification, alert. Like now, if I were to try and scan one list view of that, I'd never want to talk to anyone ever again.
And the only thing that's still alive from that era is the HD2. So I mean,
No, I think that it's actually, I've been meaning to actually write something about that. It's abusive. I don't care that you've got new deals on Subway Surfers or that Sonic Dash 2 has got. I know you're a much better player at Skyforce than I am, Juan.
Yeah,
I have to admit that, but it's just receiving all those notifications of things that shouldn't be notifications is really annoying. Really annoying.
Well, and it's exhausting. I mean, there's already so much management that has to happen. If only there were some really great pieces of software that could help us streamline, like maybe some sort of digital butler or something, right? Wouldn't that be super spiffy?
It would be pretty cool. And
whatever Jules said. Whatever Jules said.
Sorry, Jules. That would have been a great transition, but you just went completely underwater for
it. Just can't hear anything.
I think I'm about to go under the transition that happened in 17776, where the world is now ending,
or you're in the
all of our footballs.
Strangely historically specific there, Jules.
The SB Nation piece.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. Jeez, man. Get your game together. Get it on.
You're right. I'm sorry. And of course, whenever we have to unpack a joke like that, it will make it funnier for the audience.
Yeah, of course. Yes, indeed.
Let's jump into some news because there's actually quite a bit that we want to touch on this week. Starting off with that headline story, I think this is one of the bigger news in the Android enthusiast community right now, and that's some of the issues that OnePlus is facing. And that they're trying to push an update.
OnePlus, but everyone else too. I mean, we've seen reports from multiple users of different OEMs, from Sony, and like even the OnePlus 5, which is that issue. Like that has been a hit and miss device too in terms of this issue. And what we're talking about here is some reports of not being able to be completed. The phone just reboots before the dispatcher can pick up. And there's been some speculation as to whether or not this has been a AOSP deal or something with the APKs from each manufacturer. But whatever the case, it's not just OnePlus. We can't just pile on OnePlus again for another week on whatever faults they have. But it's like this is industry wide, and OnePlus is doing its due diligence by telling us that they've tested a software patch for this issue with one of the original Reddit reporters on this, and they're now spreading it out to the world via OTA. So if you don't have it, you should pull it down manually in your settings. But again, this is all going through Samsung, Sony, Motorola, Asus. There was a case where a retail worker, and this is Reddit, so take it with a grain of salt, but a retail worker was told by Asus not to sell any of the Zenfone 3 line and due to an issue, and he strongly believes that this is the issue that we're talking about.
Well, and Jaime, we've talked a lot about that user experience and what it is that we actually use on our phones. Is this maybe evidence that one of the core features of having a mobile communications device is still the ability to make a phone call? And the thing that we would want to trust most of all is that we would be able to do that in an emergency.
So question, have you already admitted that you're a millennial, or would you consider yourself to be part of Generation X like me?
Well, no, didn't you, like a couple episodes back, there's a new little mini buffer.
Yeah,
so
no,
I'm a Zenennial now.
Oh, you're a Zenennial. Oh my God.
Yeah, so in between Gen X and millennials for people born like 1978 to 1984 or something like that.
The difference is in
I am not a Zenennial. I am still Generation X, and I'm proud of it.
Well, the difference is
I'm part of the X-Men. So here's the thing. I guess it all depends, and it all depends on each country. It all depends on many usage scenarios. It's funny, when I was sitting with the former CEO of Nextbit, now defunct company, and I told him I feel that the biggest problem with smartphones today is just like all the steps that you have to do to make a phone call, to do this, to do that. And he was like, well, dude, like people don't really make phone calls. That was his response. And I'm like, Tom, I'm sorry, but I totally understand that people rarely make phone calls today, but that doesn't mean people don't, or that doesn't mean that that should be the excuse for that to be completely ignored. And so, I feel that for things like emergency phone calls and for absolutely everything, regardless, even if people don't really use these features, it doesn't really matter. They should always work, and they should work great. Yeah. And making the steps to make for example, I'm going back to the iPhone 7 Plus for a video that I'm doing. And so just making a phone call, it's like, shoot, unlock the damn phone, go into the phone application, go into the dialer, and then, it's a 4-step process that you can't really follow. And sure, there are ways to make emergency phone calls from the lock screen, but it should be better. And the other thing, and particularly with the case of OnePlus, that I was thinking when I was reading the news about that was, well, these are unlocked phones. Like, they haven't been picked up by US carriers. And, it's really difficult for companies that serve unlocked products for them to be able to abide to absolutely every single law of emergency phone calls. Because I'll tell you this much, I'm very sure that OnePlus 5 or whichever phone I bring here in Honduras will not be able to dial 199, which is the emergency phone number from here.
Right.
So I think that I agree with you. It is definitely a very broad topic over what ODMs and OEMs are doing to actually comply with many things. Mainly if they're not picked up by a US carrier. When they are picked up by a US carrier, it's a different story.
Well, and this is just, I think, for me, another data point that we can look at where the phone on our phone really is just one of the least used apps on our phone. And it seems to be getting that kind of attention, which is not a great place to be when a situation like this arises. Again, we're sort of pointing to OnePlus because the story was sort of broken on OnePlus from OnePlus owners. But the fact that it's becoming more replicatable on other devices, again, I do have some concerns that we're putting an ever-growing pressure on the supercomputer that lives in our pocket to tackle every part of our waking lifestyle. And there are a few things that these mobile computing devices actually don't do that well. That part of the experience could always be improved, but I feel like the most of the attention is off on all the shiny fun stuff.
I mean, yeah, this is a.
And Jules is gone again.
Sorry, Jules. Again,
so where were we, Juan?
We're only 2 episodes back and doing the live stream, and I'll let you guys know. The inside baseball on our Hangouts setup right now is I need 3 pieces of audio gear just to maintain a stable in-out for Google Hangouts.
Oh my God!
So now, unfortunately, yeah. I think I might have passed my problems on to Jules.
I mean, I'm going to be perpetually underwater if I was going to continue using this coaxial. No, it's not coaxial, but whatever. So what I want to get to is, well, now I lost my thought. I'm still trying to get over the comment I wanted to make about millennials texting 911 instead of calling 911, but whatever. The case is that we've dealt with a whole bunch of these network fees that we deal with. T-Mobile, AT&T, all those carriers have a 911 maintenance fee, and everyone makes a big deal about this being a lifeline to emergency services when you're out in the middle of nowhere, but these calls, they don't actually get answered that well either, too. Like I've had to wait like 16, 20, 24 rings in order to make my test call, which you're able to do. You can set up a local test call with your police department or emergency department through their non-emergency line, and then call afterwards. But it took them 20 rings to answer.
Yeah, this definitely also speaks to, I feel, like another part of that greater discussion as we're looking at the future of the telecommunications industry in the United States, how we're funding emergency services, how we're training people to interact with that, and how the localization of that changes from city to city, let alone from state to state. And we do, I feel at some point we need to arrive at sort of a nationwide standard for how these changes can be implemented. We have a couple comments from the PN Weekly hashtag on Twitter from Joel GJ. Cue the conservative conspiracy about Chicom OEMs invading the West with mobile devices, which I'm pretty sure he's joking.
The Chinese are very, very interested, but I would suspect that Yoda phone, which is still based in Russia, would be the likeliest.
Totally, it's that damn Yoda phone. And then also from Renato Laporte, this is actually a great recommendation because I just caught this too. Recommend people in the US watch Last Week Tonight episode about 911 and the problems around it, specifically with location. Definitely touches on a few of the things that we're talking about here, because there seem to be failures in the system on all fronts, from the consumer devices that we need to rely on, to the infrastructure that needs to support it, to just basic telephone service. Every piece of this, I feel, probably needs to be addressed. Again, it's something that you don't think about until you need to use it. And then if it doesn't work, man, that's bad.
You know what's worse? That the worst piece of the puzzle is the fact that what if your phone is, your battery is dead or something, which is very common these days. Like,
totally,
you have this amazing piece of machinery, like nothing we've ever had before. Amazing piece of computing that you can't guarantee will last you more than after 5 p.m. And usually most emergencies are at night. So it's one of those funny things where there is so much to do to actually make this concept reliable, to be considered reliable. Obviously, it's far better than the way it used to be, like having to run to a payphone or things like that. We've made leaps. But for example, trying to find a payphone today in New York City, there aren't any.
I mean, they're beacons, so I mean, there's that.
Well, what's hilarious about that, though, is part of what we're talking about. The notion that there could be an infrastructure of publicly available emergency phones to use in the event that your pocket communicator is defunct.
LA has this. I love seeing that on the 405.
Yeah.
I love seeing
especially
that.
On freeways. That's definitely true.
Seeing those freeway phones, because yes, it is a possibility that you'll be out of a battery or whatever. And I think I've only seen that in LA. I haven't seen it anywhere else.
I think there are a few stretches of other freeway that actually do that too. But again, it's so crucial in LA that if anything is disrupting freeway service, like they've got teams of people driving all day long to try and rectify those issues, because it's such a critical factor in how LA functions. One car broken down on the side of the road can impact miles and miles of freeway, and that's pretty ugly.
And it's mainly not because of the line that it's leaving behind, but because of everybody that's seeing what's wrong with the car, by the way.
No, totally.
It's got delays, but there's also the NYC subway, which I think all of us have some familiarity with, and those help points. But when you're stuck in the middle of the subway with a derailment in Harlem, and you don't have access, it sort of becomes more of a hell point, as those vandalized posts say.
Why you gotta call out Harlem, man? That's racist.
That's the reason why. Did you see that? Did you see that freaking derailment on the one line or two?
I did not. I'm sorry. It's again. I still long
disconnected from New York for a bit. I have been totally disconnected and on free time from New York, explicitly and on purpose.
To go to the events that you can't go to because like I have to deal with this more often. And it's just like, hooray! Another day with the MTA. I don't mind getting out of LaGuardia, which is, everyone talks about it as the hellish airport of New York. But
the hellish airport is Newark.
It's Newark.
It's
take that, Newark. I feel we should probably shift gears before we get too deep into our travel.
It's going to get really sad, and I'm going to make people offended. Keep going.
We've already stopped so many people. The other scandalous bit of news this week, of course, HTC. This was I remember I saw this first on Reddit, that someone broke this open on Reddit, that there were certain versions of the keyboard app on HTC phones which started serving advertisements after a recent update. And I feel like HTC is, again, HTC is ultimately responsible for the software that runs on their phones, but like, damn, this company can't catch a break. But I don't feel like this was a major oversight on HTC. I feel like this was likely an app that was updated, that the right code wasn't put in at the right place on the phone version, and then
remember your
HTC out as being shills.
So you remember that your U11 arrived like a week after mine, right? I had the U11, and so I did the unboxing and I did the 24 hours video. I was really, really appalled. I don't think there's any other word that I could use. And when I started going into BlinkFeed, for example, and I started noticing all the advertisement that was on BlinkFeed. And I made it a point on the 24 hours video, and I don't know if HTC saw the video and they targeted my device or what, but when I did the full review, I had no more advertisement on BlinkFeed. So I have no clue if it's because I was using a Taiwanese dual SIM unit or what is the case. All I know is, if you remember, this whole mentality of serving ads was actually born with the 1M9. HTC was looking for ways to improve their revenue, and so they decided that they wanted to do the whole advertisement on BlinkFeed. And they also decided that, if you remember, they had this like really interesting widget where the apps would shuffle on your home screen, and those apps, some of these were the ones you used most, others were actually apps that they were suggesting and that you would download. So, when I saw the news on TouchPal serving ads, I was like, oh my God, like, really, HTC? And this is what I said in my 24 hours video, which I actually typed in on the script, and I recorded the script complaining about ads, but then I couldn't portray it on video on my review because it was no longer there. But, I was very clear in my 24 hours video. I was like, listen, HTC, you're not charging $400 for this phone. I totally
this isn't
understand
an Amazon deal, right?
No, I totally understand Amazon doing this, and they're giving you a discount for the phone. I mean, think about it. Right. I saw your video on the Idol 5, on the 5S. How much is it? $200 for the 5S on Amazon?
Well, so in most markets, what it actually is I think now, because I actually tried to buy one just to see, it's $279, and then you get an $80 Amazon gift card. But still, Amazon subsidizing the price of the phone.
So I'm not going to lie. I actually buy my Kindles with advertisement on purpose because I like for them to suggest books to me. Right. It's an ebook reader, and I want suggested content focused on this. In the case of smartphones, in the case of Amazon, I know that the ads that are being served by Amazon on smartphones are not great. But I just, in the case of HTC, it's like, this is a $600 phone. Yeah. Like, please, it doesn't make sense for ads to be.
Do you feel, and again, we're speculating here, this isn't like we've got any kind of internal contact at HTC, and HTC's official response was that this was a goof, that TouchPal was going to serve ads in this way. But do you feel that this was maybe sort of a convenient oversight, that this fits into that strategy of trying to monetize the services that come preloaded?
I don't know if it was or wasn't. All I know is that, and I apologize for the honking of horns, I'm like a block away from the main road. Yeah. But the problem is that I don't know if it's an oversight or not. All I know is it's been something that started with the 1M9. I saw it on the 1A9 as well when I reviewed it. I did not see it on the HTC 10, but nor did I see it on the U Ultra when I review it, but I did see it on the U11. So whatever the case may be, it's not like if there is not a precedent. HTC was clear that this was going to be one of their strategies back with the 1M9. So, they haven't officially said anything, but it's there. And the ads that were served on BlinkFeed were terrible.
Yeah,
like
they were
really irrelevant.
Well, again, you bring up an excellent point in this economy where so many of these corporations are built around trafficking in data and making money by advertising, by serving up ads. The better your relevant ads are, the less they're going to feel intrusive. And your example of the Kindle, I think, is an excellent example because I'm in the same boat. I like it when Amazon can look at my reading patterns and suggest books based on the things that I've liked in the past. And that doesn't feel nearly as intrusive as when, a BlinkFeed like service just pops up whatever random Candy Crush ad it thinks is going to be popular for a majority of consumers, and it has nothing to do with me or my usage or my behavior. What's funny is I've actually run into a bit more of this. Like, for example, in trying to update Bixby, which we're going to talk about here in just a bit, Samsung actually had a pop-up allowing me to opt out of Samsung advertisements on their Bixby service. So again, I think that was going to be more focused on Samsung services, get the most out of your Galaxy. But, this blurring of the line between tool tips and just straight up ads. The same thing Microsoft has kind of been hammered for recently on the Windows 10 Creator Update.
Yeah.
All these helpful little tidbits of information that are really just advertisements in disguise for Microsoft services.
And I feel that the main problem is, again, if you're Facebook, you're giving me your service for free, I don't mind your advertisement because this is what keeps the this is what keeps
the product.
Exactly. No, but not only that, it's if you want to be part of this is the catch. You don't pay anything to be part of it. But for example, you're like YouTube. It makes sense for ads to be served. It makes sense for people to opt out through YouTube Red. I think that it's fine. I don't find it logical for a phone to cost flagship price and for me to be served ads. That is not correct. I mean,
that should absolutely be, that price tag should absolutely be the opt out. Yes. I'm paying this much money, a lot of money, for a premium experience.
Exactly. And I do understand that companies, Apple is the company that makes the most amount of profit from online services in the industry, up to the point where I think that it was last year that Apple literally made 100% of the profits for online services. And it was it was hilarious. How can you have a negative graph? But but that's the way it was portrayed. Right. The point being is, again, I do understand that these companies want to figure out more ways to make money, but you know what? Why don't your CEOs get a pay cut or something like that if you're not doing well, instead of serving people for something that they're already paying for? They shouldn't be bothered by this, or the option should be available. People can opt out from it at the beginning. Some ads are useful. I would be the first person to accept ads if they're useful to me, and if they're not, then I could just switch them off. I would love that.
Yeah.
Well, and AI still needs to do.
Oh, and absolutely, because I feel like one of the biggest problems facing the mobile industry in general is this sort of notion of disclosure. Just what exactly is taking place with my data, with my information, and to what degree is this relationship entwined with the cost of my service? And I don't know that there's a sexy way to communicate that to consumers, but for people who care about that, I feel it should still be made accessible. Shifting gears, we just kind of a little corporate news. Again, we're talking about major corporations and businesses and CEOs at the helm of these different companies, and it looks like we've got some action happening with Nokia, the HMD CEO position. Arto Numela, who I'm pretty sure I just mispronounced his name, is stepping down as the head of this company. Do we feel like this is maybe an early danger signal of what's happening at HMD, or is it still too early to tell what this company's strategy or plan is going to look like?
I don't know. I saw the news, but I was like, I actually am liking the strategy that. So yesterday we were sitting with Sam, which is our colleague for the Spanish website that we'll talk about later, and it's like, so how do you pronounce it correctly? Nokia? Nokia?
Nokia.
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 Which is the correct way? Like, I don't know. I think that HMD has done an amazing job in reviving Nokia. I say Nokia. I don't agree with the marketing strategy of making it exclusive for China at the beginning and all this and that. They were expecting other results at the beginning. These phones are very aggressively priced, like extremely aggressively priced. But their presence in the United States is zip. Like zero. It's not until now with the Amazon exclusive. And I think that that was genius. I think that nailing that phone as an Amazon exclusive was another good idea. Obviously, They need carrier support at some point. Their phones are pretty. They perform well. The build quality. Oh, my God. When I saw that Nokia 6 at MWC, I was like, God, this thing is gorgeous. I just wish it wasn't so underpowered. But this is just me being the spec guy that I am, but the phones are great. So I don't know. I can't speculate. I feel that Nokia's just getting started. I hope that there is more to come.
So from what we hear, it's a personal decision. It was abrupt, and everyone's supporting him in his move. And the current president of HMD Global is acting as CEO in the time being. Now, if it weren't personal, if we were to find tea leaves in what was happening with the Nokia 3, 5, and 6 launches, we've seen, it was a pretty ambitious thing. 120 markets they were aiming for, and it was going to be spread out between May and June. First whispers of shipping dates from like Clove and other UK retailers came out in like April, May, and that turned out to be May, June, and then now July. Some models, the copper color of the Nokia 6 is supposed to come out in August, even on Amazon. That does now, despite all that, that doesn't mean it's doing poorly. I mean, they have like several models in the top 20 of Amazon's best top unlocked units. So it's like, good for them.
Which is not really much in the United States. You have to bear in mind that.
Yeah. It's still enough to like have that as a plot point, as something that they can just.
Although this is the right time to start making that. This is the right time to start making that push, simply because I feel like there is it's a tiny little ember of growing interest in the unlocked market. When we're seeing Honor phones popping up at Target, there is some retail wedge room to start having those conversations with especially people in the United States. I was going to say North America, but the rest of North America understands unlocked phones way better than the United States.
And in that case, Jules, as well, remember, at that level of, as a CEO, you've never heard a CEO be fired from a company. They always step down.
Yeah.
And in most cases, they'll never mention the reasons why they were forced to step down.
Oh, it's a personal reason.
Of course.
Totally amicable.
Yeah. What happened? I mean, the launch was protracted, and the Nokia, there was. I mean, they were aiming for like a full portfolio of devices. It's not. I'm not sure if this means that things are progressing too slowly, because we've only gotten to the point where we're only starting to talk about the Nokia 8 coming out soon, and then you want to have at least a couple more. Like they had like a dozen or something. Like they wanted to do a dozen phones this year, and now it doesn't look like it's going to be happening at that pace. So, I mean,
it definitely doesn't look. Although I gotta say, let's say that this was like one of the worst CEO behind the scenes drama filled situations that we'll never be privy to. For HMD and for the Nokia brand, this is probably the best way for this to go down. I think there is enough consumer sentiment and goodwill to weather some missteps on entry-level and mid-ranger phones. But once we start talking a flagship launch and a flagship release and actually shipping product and getting consumers on board, they do not have room to make missteps there. So if there's any conflict in the internal leadership as to what the vision for this new Nokia should be, they need to iron that out with the phones that are going to be lower profile, more, just sort of spread out in the ecosystem. Some of the strong suits that Nokia has always had. I mean, they've always serviced the developing markets and entry-level markets really, really well. And so there's room there for them to make a couple mistakes. But once we start hearing about Nokia 8, and if they're still having shenanigans happening behind the scenes, then that's going to be the death of this licensing agreement.
Agreed.
We do have a couple tweets here from PN Weekly. A lot of people just really hoping to see a Nokia succeed. Renata Laporte, I really want them to succeed. The Nokia 6 is a great phone build-wise. Imagine a similar design in flagship specs. From Peter Hayton, I really want Nokia to succeed. This is an interesting question. Do you think branching out into IoT before a flagship could confuse consumers? That maybe this Nokia branding from the Withings acquisition might be spreading the name thinner for what consumers should expect from that label?
We haven't really talked about Nokia IoT, any of its applications and products yet. And, with its Ozo, like that's enterprise. I mean, I think it's clearly stratified what they're doing here, and this is just.
I don't think it's a bad idea. I mean, think about it. Who doesn't want their their smartphone to match with their scale and their armband? And this is what, to a certain degree, Apple sells. And all these companies want to mimic, to a certain degree, Cupertino's success in all services. In some of these businesses, you're not going to make money, but all these businesses help mindshare. They help the brand exposure grow. And that's really what these companies need to expand. I feel that mindshare is what Nokia needs right now, and I think that it was a smart idea. And Withings was a really good brand, so I think they did a smart move right there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree there, because this major push is, can the Nokia label become a full lifestyle brand? And again, I think Apple has been the most successful at making that transition. Samsung's probably a close second, and I think there's every opportunity to look at phones as one aspect of this being a label, which is an omnipresent part of an individual's life.
What was it? Was it Ford's CEO? It was an automaker. I think it was Volvo that said, we're no longer competing against car companies. We're competing against Apple, Amazon. These are the companies we're competing with, the companies that actually own the information and they're actually pushing innovation to another level.
Well, and consumers' dollars are finite, right? There are a lot of people who are making decisions between owning equipment like cars and then owning other things that might make their lives more fun. So it's definitely
Apple might be developing a smart car, but they don't have the plans to do so.
Well, I just mean just in general, though. Like, if we're gonna talk about different generations and their spending habits, the younger you are, the less likely it is ever in American history that you're going to own a car. That's a major fundamental shift in our economy, and that some of these things like home ownership and luxury goods ownership, that is going to be a more difficult sell to people who are looking at their spending power diminishing and then saying, well, for my buying power, I want to have experiences, not own things that then own me for me having to take care of them.
Exactly. I think that's an amazing point, Juan. And, it's interesting with the whole auto industry and the way it fell in the United States about 8 years ago. And there were obviously different ways to subsidize this industry, but in the end, it all shifted to the fact that cars became very expensive. Yeah. Like, people don't really say that, but vehicles literally grew in price nearly $10,000 a piece. Mm-hmm. So if in the past you could buy like the really cheap Mitsubishi Mirage, like the entry level, all these cars, you now have to pay $10,000 more for these cars, and all in the sake of these are fuel efficient vehicles. Yeah. So, you have an amazing point. Like, people aren't really investing in things like vehicles as much as they used to because they're not affordable anymore. I mean, people's incomes are going down. Minimum wage is becoming more common among the younger crowd, which it wasn't the case before.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's definitely, people are not investing in this. If anything, they'd rather travel. You're right.
Well,
I mean, yeah, everyone's going for the new model, and it's like 20, which is rising 20 to 50% above inflation from like 30 years ago or something like that. Whatever. It's like we're gonna go on Craigslist and buy the $2,000 car. That's what we do. That's how we survive in this kind of Starbucks barista economy, where your manager doesn't treat you right at all, and the customer's right and whatnot. Blah blah blah. Now, beyond all of that, in terms of just providing services, I think people are more conscious of companies that have a conscience. I mean, that's pretty much it. You're talking about people who talk about this on social media and say, you know what, I'm not going to spend my money on a place that doesn't treat its workers right, that doesn't know what I need at the right time, and that has robots for customer service that take a complaint or take a compliment and make it into a complaint that needs to be asked about. And that has happened to OnePlus, by the way. So, I mean,
you started the show off with like, let's not unduly crap on OnePlus like we've been. No, this is, I mean, like,
I'm just gonna laugh.
Yeah, to unpack, I mean, a lot of what we're talking about here, especially just for that kind of philosophy and comparisons to other markets, it's just it is kind of funny though, going back to watch movies from the 80s where someone's like talking about a BMW and it costs $10,000 for a hottie BMW, and you're like,
that's for a Beamer.
German engineering. Let's shift gears because we've got one other bit of news that I want to unpack here too.
Speaking of share.
Well, yeah, because this is sort of also kind of this look at some of the way that companies are being run. We've already sort of mentioned Microsoft. I mentioned Microsoft in that idea of how they're how they position their products and some of the frustrations I've had with Windows 10. But this is exactly the kind of move that makes me so frustrated to actually be a fan of Microsoft, is this ongoing perpetual confusion as to what Microsoft is trying to do in the market with Windows 10, Windows 10 for ARM devices, and then Windows 10 for mobile devices. And this is where I totally appreciate where consumers are looking at this. There's no way to concisely explain what's going on. No one really seems to know what this strategy is supposed to look like. And we've all pretty much given up on any idea of Microsoft being competitive as in the mobile phone space now.
You want me to show you just how bad it is?
Do it. I love it.
I was recently invited to Seattle for a summit, a particular summit that's other projects that we're working on. That you'll know about soon. And so the funny part is I spent, I don't know how long, people I met.
Did we lose?
Yeah, we traveled there.
The answer was 0. All of them were using iPhones.
Not
all of them. That is the Microsoft strategy for Windows Phone. Not even their employees are using them anymore. And it's really sad because, I think it was a great platform. Well, I think Windows Phone was a good platform at its time. Sadly, not supported, but clearly, not even the company is believing in their own products anymore. I mean, well, and they haven't launched any. That's how much of a belief they have. They haven't launched that anymore.
This has become a major fundamental shift in focus too, where I feel I'm spacing on the current Microsoft CEO's name, Nadella.
Satya Nadella.
Yeah, so he's definitely a server side guy. He likes services, he likes licensing, he likes making everything into an app. Well, I mean, we've been hearing those discussions about Windows 10 as a service. Your operating system should be handled just like any other app on a mobile or desktop device. And so this is what has become so frustrating about that part of the conversation, where we saw some real inroads. Microsoft was building some momentum in the Windows Phone 8.1 days. And then we went 3 years without having a proper flagship. And then we got the Lumia 950, which wasn't a very nice phone to be competing up against.
Stop being nice. Stop being nice. It was terrible.
You know, I mean, like, this is what's so frustrating is, had there been iteration in between the Lumia 930 and the Lumia 950, we never would have gotten into this position where they released such a plasticky, creaky, unpleasant phone to use. But instead, we saw this Microsoft that was like, oh, you know what? Windows Phone 7, that's totally dead. Wait until we're going to wow you with Windows Phone 8. Oh, you know what? Windows Phone 8 isn't really what we want you to use, so just hold off, wait, and Windows 10 is going to knock your socks off. And so when we keep putting these gaps in the market, there's no momentum for developers. There's no momentum for consumers. You feel like you're being left out to dry after you've spent hundreds of dollars to jump into this ecosystem as an outlier, because it's not, you know, part of the iOS or the Android ecosystem. And then years later, we still get to this point where they're teasing some idea that they might eventually consider the possibility of doing some market research on asking people whether or not they should potentially release another phone. And you're like, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me 12 times. No, still shame on me. I gotta go.
No, and I think that it has a lot to do with. I'll give you an example. I remember when, you know, back in the old days of Steve Ballmer, everything was money. Like, we'll see where we make money. We're doing this because we're making a little money here. We're making a little money there. It was always that talk. Satya, I love his approach. I love the fact that he is less about the money, more about how these services can be useful to you. I feel that Microsoft still has more to go. Like, for example, this whole Windows 10 creators update is about anything but creators. I'm like, okay, so you're telling me that this is the creators update, and all you have is a 3D version of Paintbrush. But you still don't have a really good video editing application. So what can I create with that? You don't have a good, like, aside from Paintbrush, what else was on this creators update? Like, really, that, you know, I feel that this company really needs to walk the talk, because if you saw Panos and Meyerson in their keynotes, it's all, we want to help you create. We want to help you do this. We want to help you do that. But it's just such an oddity that, you know, this company is not really focusing on what they're saying. And so then you have Apple. Apple has got services that don't make money, like the Apple Watch, like the Apple TV, but they don't let these services go. They still continue pushing them because at some point they're gonna blow up, and that's the way they see it, I guess.
And that used to be Microsoft. I mean, think about Microsoft. Think about the Xbox, if the Xbox were released under this current Microsoft administration, and it would be withering on the vine. We would have an Xbox, and then 4 years later, they'd be like, oh, well, here's like a little 0.1 update that you're really going to like, but hold off, because we're going to release an Xbox 2 that's going to knock your socks off in 6 more years. And you're like, that's not how this market functions. It's not what it resembles. And so I completely agree with you on sort of the general focus of a guy like Nadella at the head of this company. But what I find so frustrating is, at some point, we need to hear some cohesive messaging from Microsoft. And that's what's really killing me, is if Microsoft wants to go off and focus on being a services company, instead of having our own phone platform, here are all of the Microsoft services that are going to make your iPhone or your Android phone even better. Great. But let's stop dabbling with these public beta experiments, teasing information about will they or won't they ever release a Surface phone. I think it's time to poop or get off the pot.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always been like this with Nadella, and ever since the transfer of power, especially with the Nokia dumping, and just you know, it's always been, all right, let's start over, build things up, tear them down, let's start it over. And things just, you know, they're trying to aim for a viral hit. And that's something that you can't do in a business like this.
And with every single release, it's the desperation of, oh, no, this time we really mean it. This time it's really going to wow you. And then they have
this time it's really real. And then they're going to have an event in February for a product they want to launch in December. That is like, see, this is, okay, so by the way, you know, probably one of the views from Michael Fisher when he was working with us was the Lumia 950 review.
Yeah, that was rough.
It was probably one of his It was probably one of the news, but it's like up until like minute 6 or something when Michael just starts throwing in all the complaints of the phone. And he's like, reboots. Boy, howdy. Does this phone love to reboot? And so his point at the end is like, oh, wait a second. This phone costs $650 and it feels like a beta product. Are you serious? Like, you know, let's think about it for a minute. Apple took years before they announced the product, and then it took them 6 months before they were able to push it out, and then it took them a full year, even against their own will, to launch an app store. Like, people forget how long it took for the iPhone to mature into what it is. People forget how long it took Android to mature into what it is. And I feel that Microsoft really needs to just step down and say, okay, become popular. Let's ride that lightning and let's focus on making a phone platform that actually works. Just as much as we worked on Windows 10 and just as much as it delights, because I'm not going to lie, my favorite computer right now is the Surface Pro 4. I think to death.
Look at that as another example. It took 3 generations of Surfaces before people were really taking them seriously in the market.
Exactly.
And it wasn't, we put out a Surface 1 and then we went silent for 3 years. It was we put out a Surface 1 and that got panned by most people. And we put out a Surface 2 and a few people thought that was a little bit better. And we put out a Surface 3 and people started taking it seriously. And by Surface 4, this was a premier Windows experience and people understood that.
Yeah, and again, sorry, Jules, please go ahead. I've been talking.
I was just going to ask you about your opinions of how Panos Panay has taken his approach to these disparate product lines, because when you consider, you go back to Windows Mobile and you had a years-long base, and it was, you know, it was fairly popular up until the newer, smarter competition ate it up. And then you have PCs, which were in a death spiral, everyone kept saying, and now this new form factor is taking things up a notch again. So, I mean, we're in sort of a flux situation, and you know, we've seen, you know, a death spiral turn around and a hot market, at least back in, you know, 06, 07, 08, and 09, that was rushing up and building up, and they failed to ride the lining. And Panay,
so
how long has he been there?
So here's the problem. In that meeting that I really can't talk about what happened in the Microsoft meeting that I went to. All I'm going to say is this. It was really funny when they showed me a product and I was like, wow, this is really cool. The problem is that this product, you know, and I looked at it from a practicality standpoint. And by the way, this has nothing to do with smartphones or tablets or anything. It's actually a software product. And I saw it and I'm like, okay, this is really cool. But is there a possibility for you to do this? And the response was, that is actually a very cool idea, but could you tell me how we could market that to the enterprise sector? And I'm like, you get it, do you? I actually said that. I'm like, okay, wait a second. Let me understand this. Your focus over the past 2 keynotes of different Microsoft products that have been announced is, we love consumers. We want you to create. We want you to do. But then your mentality is still that you want a one-size-fits-all solution for everything. It doesn't work that way. You can't approach everything from how are we going to sell this to the enterprise standpoint. You need consumer products, enterprise products. It's been that way.
Like, you overlap, but you need to talk to them in different ways.
Like, think about it, Juan. Back in the day when Steve Jobs pulled Apple from the shackles, he was like, I don't want 10 different types of Macs. I want 2 Macs, a Pro and a consumer.
Yep.
I don't need a consumer.
Server. I need a 4 terabyte server in the back of my house that needs to be feeding tons of consumer information. I just need a little thing with the Wi-Fi.
Well,
and
actually, what's kind of funny is a lot of consumers are actually looking at multi-terabyte solutions these days too, because the cloud isn't there.
It's such an irony when you have, like, there are only 2 versions of Mac OS. Mac OS, Mac OS Server. How many versions of Windows are there? Does anybody know? So
no, I don't think I don't even think Microsoft knows.
I don't even think Microsoft knows. And so wait a second. So you're telling me that you create different versions of Windows, Home, Pro, whatever it is that you have, and you still expect for everything else that you do to cater. You can't do one size fits all. You either branch out and create a separate consumer division that only focuses on creating consumer products, and sure, create a pro version of whatever you do and sell that to your enterprise. But like, for example, think about it. Video editors on Windows in particular, like, sure, Premiere Pro is amazing, but for things like YouTube, it is too complex. And Apple had a time like that. They had Final Cut 7, and it was what movie makers used, and they still use it today. But think about it, the boom in YouTube and the boom in having everybody be able to create really good looking video started with Final Cut 10. I mean, people panned it. People were like, no, it's not as powerful as 7. It doesn't really matter. What it did is it created a spur of creators, of everybody being able to, I mean, think about it. I would not be like, the difference between how much it takes me to build a Pocketnow Daily in Premiere to how much it takes me on Final Cut is hours. Like, the difference is hours, not for rendering times, but simply the practicality of the tool. And so if like Excel, for example, how many people actually know how to use Excel?
Well, I mean, oh, you weren't asking specific. Okay.
No, yes, but the point being is, do you really know how to create if or VLOOKUP array? Okay, you do, but how many people do you know how to do that? And so going back to that, that's the problem with Microsoft. Either they figure out how to create a consumer division that focuses on the phone business or consumers, or I don't think there's a point.
Actually, at this point, I kind of don't want them to. At this point, I want Microsoft off in crazy R&D land to look at what the future of data and services should look like. And I think them trying to reinvest in trying to become a third-place player in the OS market is throwing good money after very, very bad. You guys have heard me grumble on about the post-smartphone world and how that's coming up fast, and we're going to be splitting services off. And then you look at a product like HoloLens, which they keep teasing. They keep showing us these glimpses of what their AR strategy could look like, and they still haven't gotten any kind of consumer version, or I mean, an actual enterprise. Like, if we're going to say it's got to be for enterprise first, that doesn't exist yet. And so we're watching VR catch up. We're watching Google and Apple play with AR strategies. And by the time Microsoft delivers something, we'll already be off on competing solutions.
Jaime,
ask you this: who's actually going to be willing to buy a HoloLens for whatever it is, when now you've got ARKit on iOS, which is obviously not going to be as complete as but it's going to be available for everybody in November, not like in the case
and you know what doesn't matter is whether or not it's the most complete. It matters if developers embrace it. And from what I understand, ARKit on Apple is actually really easy to code for.
Especially when you're getting kids in on Swift from
right.
Yep, Swift playgrounds. You're doing things. I feel that they're doing things right in many ways, and they're doing a lot of things right. Microsoft is cool again. I make my point. I love what they're doing, but in the phone space, they need to shift their whole focus, or they need to walk the talk. Is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, in their presentations and in their keynotes, they're saying that they're focusing on creators, but their products don't show that.
Well, now, because we're talking about all these services that we want to be able to access, but now we're seeing Bixby finally getting activated. Its voice getting activated in the US with all these little functions. They created a little nice teaser video talking about, oh, hey, you can screenshot things and text it to your sister in the same voice command, which is, it's great. And there's a limited like third-party app integration, so you can go into Google Play Music and create a playlist with album art and whatnot. So I mean, it's been months. It's been months since the thing damn launched.
Well, and it's been months, and I don't know that any of us even have it yet.
Yeah,
I know people have been getting the update, but I've been racking my essay to try and
Ryan, but even with the T-Mobile roaming SIM card, like nothing. Have you received it?
No, I mean, I even tried like flash installing APKs to see if I could Frankenstein it to work, and it's a no-go. In fact, when I did that, that's when I started getting pop-ups about Samsung ads. So it was like Samsung punishing me for trying to install Bixby. No,
but here's the thing. I go ahead, Juan. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I was going to actually throw it to you and just my curiosity in how this competes with other voice assistants. And to me, it still feels like Samsung's kind of reinventing the wheel as opposed to adding something that's going to profoundly change the way I use my phone. But please take your thoughts and take them from there.
I mean, I said it on yesterday's Daily. I love if this thing can do what the teaser video shows, it looks unique. It looks unique from a point that it is context aware, and it is able to help you actually do more things with your phone that would be, like most people would have to actually interact with a certain part of the phone and just copy, paste, and do all these things. Where it seems that Bixby is able to do that on its own. Obviously, we have to test it to provide a full opinion. What I will say is, you know, we go back to the problem with digital assistants. Like, the biggest problem with Google Assistant is that it doesn't connect with anything yet. Like, there are very few third-party applications that serve with it, whereas Siri right now, which was left in the ashes for years, became cool as of last year. Where, you know, I'm not gonna lie, I'm like, hey Siri, can you get me an Uber to go to the airport?
Well, did you get the Alexa update for your U11?
Sorry.
Anyone listening to this?
I wasn't talking to you.
Did you get the Alexa update for your U11?
I have not fired it up because I've been really.
Because that's another thing too.
But how is it?
It's surprisingly, because again, I don't have an Echo, so I'm very ignorant of the Amazon ecosystem right now. And just their method for adding their skills, the little applets that you can control through voice actions. I mean, there's this really great battle happening between things that you can control with your voice that live on your phone and services that you can control with your voice that are part of smart home installations or other services that are sort of broader than that. And so right now, Google Assistant is pretty good for search and is pretty good for controlling things on your phone. Bixby looks like it could help augment some of that. Again, controlling things that live on your phone. And then Alexa has this really robust developer ecosystem for services that live outside of just the glowing rectangle you hold right in front of your face. And so the unfortunate part of that is you have to memorize, who do I talk to on my phone to get this to work? And that's a lot to ask consumers, but there is potential, I feel. I think there's still potential for any company to walk in and deliver a killer AI, but I feel there's potential to help us really shift up how we use our phones.
I feel that the whole move of Alexa, I feel that the whole move of Alexa moving to phones is genius. This is like, and I hate to bring this example, but I'll have to bring it first. Like Roku. Like, I got this Roku TCL smart TV the other day, and I hate smart TVs, but I love the concept of being able to control everything from my phone and not having to juggle with the controller. Yeah. And so for me, the main reason why I had never bought an Alexa speaker was because I am not going to talk to the damn speaker. All right. I'm not going to ask for diapers or what have you.
Right.
Like, I think that I still need that. I need to close that gap where I am very simply going to ask a speaker to just buy something for me and that I'm not able to see what I'm doing on a screen. That's the reason why I love that Amazon Echo. What is it? The Show or the one that has a screen. That for me is genius because I'm actively seeing what the speaker is doing in an interface. I think that was genius. Now, I love the whole concept of it being in my phone, and because I've never used it, I can't really have an opinion on it. But if I'm able to create the things that I want on the phone, which has a keyboard, which has a more interactive way, and if that all syncs to whatever the speaker is going to do as well, then yes, I am buying the damn speaker. That I feel, if these things can coexist, I feel that that's a smart approach, but I'll have to give it a try. I'll download it.
I think right now the frustrating aspect is that you have to have multiple devices to fill the gaps. Like what Alexa does well, is going to complement what Google Home Assistant does well. And
it's not a sense of continuity as much as it is just patchwork and covering this with like duct tape or something like that.
And that we've been messing with stuff like this since the Xbox with Kinect too. You know, it's funny to think that there have been so many implementations of this, but right now a little Bluetooth speaker is the one that we're sort of most impressed by.
And all I see is people saying Xbox turn on, Xbox off, and then people don't do anything else with it. That's all they do.
Or, you know, that's not true. Is like I was sitting on my friend's couch once. And he was like, "Hey, watch! I can totally bring up Netflix." And he tried 3 times to use voice actions to play a movie on Netflix, and then he's never tried ever again. It didn't work once. It's now a non-starter. He'll pick up a remote. He'll pick up his phone. That's it. It was done. You know,
you can't.
That's all you get.
These at the start. No, there's no room for that. So get good, Microsoft, as I would say to Xbox gamers. In any case, let's go through a little quick fire on what we have for hardware, or at least the next few stories here. So we're talking about the Xiaomi Mi Note 3 possibly for 2018. And instead of a 5.5-inch flexible OLED display, we're talking about a 6-inch rigid OLED display. I mean, I included this in there just as a thought about LCD and OLED and how it's still this hard ramp up for people to deal with, for manufacturers to deal with, and the big deals flexible OLED these days. So how do you think, how much of a train wreck do you think this transition has been, especially with the iPhone 8 putting a wrench to things?
Juan?
Oh, it's like that was when you just passed right to me. No, really, I mean, for this news, for this story specifically, I think the big news is, will Xiaomi hammer out a meaningful deal with Samsung that can actually fulfill demand while we're watching the iPhone sort of suck up all of the manufacturing capacity? Because this is potentially short-term bad news for LG Display. LG has its own separate wing of the LG Electronics Corporation that make panels and stuff like that. And this is another one. You want to talk about a company that didn't act with consistency. When they started making the Flex, they were producing flexible OLEDs for their own phones, and then they just sort of stopped. And LG's went back to LCDs. And this is something where, had they maybe kept a little more pressure on the market, they would have had the manufacturing in place to be a more direct competitor for Samsung to fulfill this demand.
I think there's more market pressure in terms of just active matrix, organic, just regular instead of the plastic. You know, there's certain qualities to it that made it much more harder to compete for them to compete. But you know, that's components talk that we can get into. I mean, it's Apple. If it weren't for Apple, we wouldn't have these problems. We would still be in LCD land for the next, I don't know, maybe.
Well, but this is the kind of stuff that's going to impact a lot of sort of the tangents on smartphones, right? You know, like the VR experience is going to be nicer for most consumers on an OLED, especially once we can start working with either the pixel pitch or the sub-pixel arrangements, not to get too deep in the weeds. But these are the types of things that we need to ramp up the manufacturing so that everyone's sort of competing on those same points. And you're going to have a lot harder time if you're a smaller manufacturer, because the Samsungs, the Apples, these companies are just leeching the market dry. So that's where I feel like, again, LG missed an opportunity to keep up the pressure on their own development. Because I think the next thing is going to be, you know, the idea of maybe transparent displays. You know, once we start really solving some of those problems for consumer applications there, just imagine the automobile windshield industry having access to heads-up displays that are properly built into your car windshield. You know, that kind of demand is going to suck up the market even worse. And just the same way that we're going to be looking at batteries for electric cars. But now I'm going off on tangents, so someone please stop me and go to the next story.
Quantum vision. Let's go into the iPhone SE. There could be a sequel, apparently, according to French outlets, and this could come at an event in August. And there is reason to believe that, despite the fact that people are trending more toward the 5-inch mark in terms of form factor, they have a factory in India that they fought very hard to establish so that they can set up a store in India, their growth market, their main growth market, and they're making iPhone SEs at that factory. So
I think the iPhone SE is like the iPod. I mean, I think that thing is not going to go away anytime soon. It makes sense for them to continue iterating. I think it's going to happen.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, it's just I desperately hope that it's once again the same shell, just with updated specs. I still think that the iPhone 5 is one of the most beautiful things that Apple's ever created. This is the best premium one thumb on the go user experience that you can have, especially if you've got tiny little hobbit thumbs like I do. This is probably the most successful Apple product that I've ever had the joy of reviewing. So there's just the personal aspect of it that I hope that they do iterate another one. And if this pressure comes from India, then so much the better. Because they're talking about something like a €399 price point for an updated iPhone SE with better specs and better storage. And that could be epic. That would put a big hurt on a lot of other premium mid-rangers.
Indeed.
Agreed.
Indeed. All right. Do you think the HomePod will save Siri? Because we're looking at some analytics from Verto, and they're talking about decline in usage, a decline in user base in Siri, as well as S-Voice, which is Samsung's little voice thing. And the beneficiaries of all that are Cortana from Microsoft, Google, multiple ways that you can access Google Assistant, as well as Amazon Alexa. And even though Hound has a lateral move, I guess you could say, for user base, there are some interesting metrics for that. But usage time has increased on the major platforms, and time spent overall per month is going down. So, I mean, you're trading per session usage for the amount of times that you need to ask Alexa or Siri or whatever for a certain thing. Are session numbers or lower sessions? Are lower session numbers better for consumers and higher session usage times better for companies?
Well, I mean, let me throw this one to you, Jaime. I mean, not to sort of disrupt the question that you were asking there, Jules, but you were talking about Siri beforehand, and that there have been improvements to that setup. Do you think a standalone piece of hardware would make more of a difference in getting people back on Siri?
So think about how many companies are adopting Alexa right now. Peripherals. Like, it's insane how much Amazon is expanding the reach of Alexa. I think that if Apple doesn't do the same thing, particularly with their amount of market dominance, I think that they would be losing ground like crazy. I don't think the HomePod is just going to be this really ugly ball of yarn with a crazy price tag. I feel that, I feel that the biggest challenge is really Apple really needs to take Siri a little more seriously in what, we say artificial intelligence, and I feel that a lot of services are not there yet. I do love the fact that I can, one of the main reasons why I carry an Apple Watch in New York is because all I have to do is hey Siri, give me walking directions to this spot, and it always gets it right. I despise Apple Maps, but it works really well for walking directions.
Right.
And it wasn't until Android Wear 2.0 that you could do the same thing with Google, with Android Wear. And one of my biggest complaints with Android Wear in the past, with Google Maps in the past, is that it would walk north, and I'm in the middle of the frickin' concrete jungle. How am I supposed to know where north is?
Right.
I need for you to tell me left, right, walk straight, things like that. And Apple was the first company to figure the basics out in this. And so I feel that the more people rely on Siri, the more people are going to need for it to connect to more things. Right now, for example, things like HomeKit require for you to have an active iOS device. Like, for example, either you have an Apple TV or you have an iPad that can control these HomeKit services. That shouldn't be that way. There should be something else. And it's funny because Apple makes routers, but these routers don't have that functionality.
Right.
So I feel that there is a lot of things that Apple really needs to start taking seriously. And the HomePod is not it, Apple. Not because it's not a good idea. But because of the price point is really stupid.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any other way to say it. The price point is stupid. So that's my 2 cents.
Now, I understand the psychology, because it kind of goes back a little to, like, I was saying, my buddy's experiences with Xbox and Kinect. You get one try. So with all of these people out there using iPhones, I'm sure most of them have tried to dabble with Siri, not gotten something that they wanted out of a query or a search or navigation, and then just never really bothered to go back. So if Apple comes out with a piece of hardware right now, these little assistant speakers are becoming super vogue. People buy back into an Apple version because it just works with all of my other Apple products, and they give Siri another try. And again, we might be talking about years of them not having tried Siri to now get a new flavor, a new taste of what Siri can do now. I think that makes sense. But where I completely agree with you, Jaime, is it doesn't make sense at the price point that they put the HomePod out for. So that's a steep, try us again, try us again
I've seen,
the first time price point.
I was flying into LaGuardia. The other day, and it was the first time that I actively saw somebody talk to Siri. And I had never seen it before. Zero.
Right.
Like, my sister has an iPhone 7 Plus, full blown and everything. She never uses Siri. And I was like, just tell Siri to set an alarm, because she's like, I'm like, what are you doing? No, I'm setting my alarm for tomorrow. Just tell Siri to do it for you. And she's like, really? You can do that? Like, most people's response is that. It's funny, but it's ironic just how few people actually watch Apple's keynotes and what Siri can do, and they rely on what we show consumers that the products can do. And so, it was this person just walking out, and it was like, "Can you get me a lift to take me home?" That was what the person said to Siri, standing right beside me, and immediately Siri responded. Immediately, the lift was requested, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I feel that is the ticket.
Well,
I feel that is the ticket.
That's become a major gripe for me with a lot of companies. Like, you've heard me bitch and moan about LG's marketing in the past. One of the most successful steps that Amazon took was getting Alexa in the show Mr. Robot, where the female investigator has this sort of bedroom sequence where she's asking Alexa questions. And it informs the character, because we're supposed to understand that this is sort of a lonely woman. But instead of having a lonely cat lady and she's talking to her cat, we have a lonely tech lady and she's talking to an Alexa. And all of a sudden, the appeal, the usage, what you could use an Alexa for, what Amazon's ecosystem looks like, how the speaker functions, totally spelled out, I think, in one of the best in-show marketing synergy commercials that they ever could have put together at the right demographic. I mean, people watching the show Mr. Robot, you've got the right demo if you've got a branding commercial in the middle of the show like that for an Amazon service. And I feel like Apple needs to kind of get back to some of the iPhone advertising of old to really try and better inform their consumer base what these things can do now.
And I think that Amazon actually does it best. You don't have to say, "Hey Alexa," or "Okay Alexa."
We're going to be turning on so many assistants on that one.
All you have to do is say, Alexa. All you have to do is say, Alexa. Yeah. I feel, when in my review of the Google Pixel and the whole Google Assistant, when it came out, I'm like, okay, there is nothing natural about having to say, "Okay Google," all the time.
Yeah.
There's nothing natural, and you're the biggest problem with breaking that barrier is having, like, Google on its own is not a normal word. Like, it's not, you don't unless somebody named their dog Google, it's not a normal word. There is nothing wrong with it just being Google. Google, can you get me this? Google, could you help me with that? And just eliminate that "Okay Google."
If we're gonna make the action phrase something like a casual greeting, at least give us the ability to, I still love pulling out my Moto X2 just for some of those really basic software additions to their voice search, where I could train a different keyword to activate.
I was like Lord Vader.
Yeah.
I was like Lord Vader.
I want to do it something like really like, howdy, Lord Vader. You know?
No, for
Like,
me, it was just that. It was Lord Vader. That's what I use with the Moto X.
That's hilarious.
Well, speaking of Lord Vader, why don't we involve him in the situation? And let's go into Lenovo. They're working with Disney for a new proprietary platform for an augmented reality game. It's going to start off with Star Wars Jedi Challenges, and that's going to be coming
Dear
soon.
Lenovo, who came up with the design of that goggle thingy you've got there? Because like, it looks really bad.
Okay, lightsaber is fine. Shut up.
The lightsaber is fine, but the goggles
lightsaber's good.
The lightsaber's
No,
cool.
The only thing I wish is that they had made it look a little bit more like
like a stormtrooper mask or something like that.
Exactly. Because it's Jedi, you take it back to the blaster shield helmet that Luke wears in A New Hope when he's training with his lightsaber.
Exactly.
It's just a little bit of the plastic on the outside clad to resemble that, as opposed to just a generic VR looking headset thing.
And that's not even generic. That looks terrible, man.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, have you seen some of those like cheap, put your phone in this cradled headset things? Like, it looks a little bit better, in my opinion, than some of the worst or most egregious cardboard style headsets I've seen. But no, I completely agree. It does look a little funky because it doesn't look Jedi. It looks Sith. It looks.
I think that Lenovo was like they saw Acer's what is it, 180 VR thingy, and they were like, okay, that thing looks like a freaking like something that came out of Jurassic Park. We can make something a little less ugly, and we're gonna be just fine.
I don't know. It's like I was about to say, like, it looks like a black Virtual Boy, like old school Nintendo.
God. Yes.
And that makes me sad. But what I'm excited about, though, just this notion that you've got a major tech outlet. Lenovo has resources. They have been digging into AR.
Yes.
They're probably piggybacking on some of their Project Tango experience with the Fab 2 Pro.
And even with the Windows headsets, too.
Right. Well, and we know that they've also been drawing, some partnership work with Qualcomm. I still think one of the best apps to show that off is that Qualcomm app where you're fighting aliens that come out of other dimensions and vortexes, and like a giant worm pops up out of your living room floor and you've got to kill it. This is like a first gen application of AR, and it works really well. To see Disney partner with Lenovo was a smart play.
I could just imagine myself like knocking the vase on the side and then just hitting the TV on the other end. That's going to be
as you knock over stuff in your office. Right now.
I was about
that's hilarious. So again, but like we were saying earlier, this Lenovo is going to be steps ahead of a company like Microsoft now. If they get this out in the market, it's got the Disney name on it. It's got the Star Wars name on it. It's going to be a lot of consumers' first experiences with augmented reality, because a lot of people aren't playing with this on their phones. Where's HoloLens? Where's Microsoft?
Just think about this. This is the perfect sequel to Pokemon Go. Like Pokemon Go exposed children to AR like nothing. And now it's going to have the Star Wars branding. I mean, right now, I think that they're just piggybacking on children and the whole, what happened with Pokemon Go. And it's like, you know what? This is not going to make money now. But if we get children on board, this is going to blow up in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Once they become teenagers or whatever. I mean, I think it's the smartest way to do it. Yes, I agree.
And they were first. This isn't another company trying to make a Pokemon Go competitor. Because think about it, how many emails did we get? This is going to be the app that's going to out Pokemon Go. This is going to be the next AR amazing thing. You're like, no. You're already irrelevant if you're thinking you can just piggyback on the novelty of what Pokemon Go brought. And so now any other thing that comes after this is going to be the service which came after Disney Star Wars AR.
Yeah, and let's hope they figure it out. Because honestly, the biggest problem with Pokemon Go was, okay, let me get this straight. So I have to buy a what type of data plan for my kid because he wants to go chasing Pokemon. So the reason why Pokemon Go was a novelty was why it didn't last as long as people wanted it to last. less was mainly because of that. I am here, there is not unlimited data. In the United States, there's not unlimited data, or if there is, it's extremely expensive, and nobody's going to buy it for their kids. Forget it.
What was hilarious though is, so Pokemon Go comes out. We're in that first week of just everyone going nuts over it. And I forget why we had to go to the mall. It's not important. And we're walking by, and, you know, they all have their little carrier kiosks. And every single one of them had some kind of Pokemon Go travel pack where you could sign up for extra data, and you'd get like a little backpack with a water bottle and a portable phone charging battery. And, you know, like every single one had some kind of put together with the overstock crap that we haven't sold. Yeah. Just ready to go.
And we also saw the same thing with apps like Super Mario Run. I mean, it was awesome and everything, but it's not. Why I'm like, why is Super Mario Run data driven? Like, why does it have to require data every single time? Just download the damn game. And if I want to play it, yes, but the problem.
It's 2017.
But the problem is
experience with everyone.
See, yes, but it's
with its AR thing in Disney, it's not like going to be that show from Anglia Television called Nightmare with a K. You better get it right. And where it's like people have this helmet on and they don't know what they're doing. It's sort of AR-ish, but not really. And 4 kids have to help them along, have to help this kid along in battling quests. Like, that was the only real social use for putting a helmet that blocks your vision on top of your head. I don't see that, you know, being exploited, you know, much beyond personal use and just talking about it.
Well, but I mean, that's also kind of what makes AR interesting, is that it gets us away from blocking out the world around us. That's why I hope this is done well, because it'll be the first step in showing people we can interact with the world around you with data and services. But really, ultimately, I just hope that at some point I get that really terrible Star Trek: The Next Generation game where you have to throw frisbees into tubas, and you get like a dopamine hit, and then they try and steal the Enterprise because of the video games and the kids these days and the whatnot. But let's wrap up our last story, because I do want to get to these viewer emails before we have to let Jaime go, because the show is running a little long.
I need some blood.
Go for it.
Anyways, D-Brand is accepting pre-orders for its Galaxy Note 8 skins and blah, blah, blah. There's nothing to see here. Let's move on. No, wait. they have the render of the Note 8 or something. Look at that. That's cool. Look, the dual cameras there. The fingerprint sensor is kind of offset, but still at that annoying position. And the bezels are less, but that's to be expected if you're following the S8's design language, you could say. They get really cheeky about disclosing the whole thing, you know, at the picture as a quote-unquote leak. Do we have inside information about the Note 8? No. Maybe. It says cheekily in, I don't know, in small text. And then, you know, you can pre-order it, and once you get your device, or once the device launches, you'll soon be able to have all that shipped. All told, it's about $16-ish, but you have to account for shipping and whatnot. So there you go. That's the story. Let's move on.
Yeah, I feel good about moving on. Let's hit some viewer email. All right, we do have 3 questions from podcast@pocketnow.com. The first one up, I'm going to chew through here real quick. This comes from Keis, C-H-I-S. I was going to say Chris, but that's not his or her name. And now I don't know how to pronounce that. Hey guys, your thoughts on this, please. Nokia has been making phones since way back during the time of the Palm phones, PDAs that had the communicator. If they developed their first smartphone with Android instead of sticking with Symbian, do you think they would still be in the game now against Apple, or at least alongside Samsung, LG, and the others? Jaime, what do you think? I mean, there's a lot of armchair quarterbacking on what a company should have done or how they could have been successful. Hindsight's always 2020. Would they have been just another Android manufacturer, or would they be at the top?
I don't know, man. What made Samsung Galaxy so popular? They threw marketing at that thing like nothing we've ever seen. You know, it's really hard to predict. I think that the move to Windows Phone wasn't stupid given the scale that Microsoft had at the time. Like, it doesn't really make sense for Windows Phone to have failed so much. Like, Nokia and Microsoft were the perfect combination to have this take off. And there were some really unique things that both companies brought to these smartphones. It was just the fact that for some reason they didn't take off. So I rather not do the should have game, because even if Nokia would have adopted Android early, you have to understand, like, Nokia was also competing. They had Symbian, and they had licensings. I think that even Samsung was a licensee of Symbian.
Yeah, they were.
So think about it. I mean, why were they going to adopt Android if they weren't making any money out of it? Whereas, and here's the problem. I mean, think about it. We have so many OEMs that have adopted Android: Samsung, LG, HTC. Which of these companies are making money today? So it's really hard for, aside from phones. So it's really hard for us to say, yes, they should have done Android. Right now, the only company that's making money on Android is Samsung. They are the only ones. Everybody else is struggling. So, even for the companies that adopted Android early, like HTC, which was the pioneer, they're not making money. So I can't really respond to that.
I'll put myself out there and say, I really feel that had Nokia, especially with the leadership that Nokia had at the time, had they jumped on Android, they still would have been ignoring most of the North American market. They had no interest in playing in the United States at all. And I think that they would have ended up becoming, at best, another company like Motorola, where just like, Nokia got bought out by Microsoft, they might have been optioned with the changing tides in consumer responses, and they would have fallen, I feel, just like you were saying, to the media juggernaut that was Samsung at the time. I just don't think the leadership at Nokia anticipated the change in consumer behavior any better than BlackBerry, Palm, or Microsoft did.
Exactly. I mean, all these companies underestimated Apple. They underestimated Google. And you have to remember, like, both Google and Apple were non-players. Like, when the iPhone launched, I mean, Apple was, barely selling a few computers. Their biggest market was the iPod.
Yeah.
And, think about Google. Like, Google was just a search company. They weren't doing anything else. It was their vision in what pertains to services that really made smartphones take off. Like, who would have thought? It wasn't really the smartphone, it was the apps.
Right. It's all about the apps. I mean, it's sad because, again, Windows Mobile was on point there, but yeah, they completely missed the market there.
Yeah,
indeed. All right, so let's move on to our next question from Ben Chung. Hello, Pocketnow. After Marquez Brownlee, MKBHD, made me aware of the high-quality movement V2 clip on wide, tele, and macro lenses. I was wondering which is better, a dual camera system with a wide-angle lens and using a clip-on 2x tele lens on the normal camera, or a dual camera system with 2x tele lens and using a clip-on wide-angle lens on the normal camera. So, in other words, like, the normal camera wouldn't go away unaffected. It would just, like, you would just clip on a little 2x wide or tele. And which one? I mean, stock glass on devices is kind of an iffy subject every time you deal with it. Sometimes it's the pixel where you get the flaring and whatnot, and then other times it's it's okay. I mean, the barreling on the wide angle of the LG G6 on the V20 is kind of odd because it's not exactly centered, but it's you give and you take. So what you think?
Well, and Jaime, you've traveled quite a bit with both sort of LG solutions and with Apple solutions. What do you think? More flexibility to have the wider camera built in, or just add some glass up front?
Spoiler for my After the Buzz. I don't have, like, I was looking into my iPhone and I'm like, crap, I don't have any zoomed in shots. Why? Because I don't use the telephoto lens. Why don't I use the telephoto lens? So here's the thing. I love the LG G6 wide angle camera. And the reason why I love it is because one of the things that I hate the most about smartphones, particularly with video, I use smartphones mostly for video, is because of the crop. It's because of that, what is it, Juan, 27 millimeter?
So somewhere around there. Some of them are even closer to 30.
Okay, so here's the thing. Whenever, and just, for viewers and listeners, whenever I use a 35 millimeter lens, because of its low light capabilities on my camera, I have to be holding the phone like 3 feet away. I have to be using a monitor to be able to hold the phone 3 feet away, just because I need that. Because so point is, that crop provided by smartphones is already annoying compared to your standard DSLR, which usually their kit lenses are 16 to 18 millimeters. You're farther away from you're farther away from the subject on a DSLR than you are with a smartphone. So the fact of the matter is, I don't think there's a point in buying any sort of lenses unless you think that you're actively going to be zooming into shots. From my experience, I tell you, I have the iPhone 7 Plus. I've been using it, and it's funny. Like, I was even looking into my gallery, and I rarely use this phone for photography, because ever since the LG G5 and the V20, and now the G6, I rely on the wide angle a lot. There are stories you just can't tell. Like, for example, I use this example, but it's the best example I have. If you're in the Vatican City, you're doing the whole Vatican tour, you're with another 400 people in the same room. Yeah. You can't move to get the right shot. So isn't it cool for you to be able to just take the shot and crop whatever you want from it later, because you didn't have to step back to get the whole monument? You just use that wide angle, and it works perfectly for Instagram if you're going to do a squared shot, or you just zoom into it a little. It's got great resolution. I do feel that, these lenses, these dual camera lenses, need to do a better job at providing better optics for that wide angle. But if anything, I don't think you'll be using the telephoto. Honestly, I wouldn't waste any money on it. And in the case of wide angle fisheye, whatever it is, solutions that they're out there, I feel those solutions are terrible, because they create this like sort of distortion on the borders on each side.
It's called fringing.
And you're not going to use a shot like that. It creates this like really horrible magnified lens sort of effect that, either one is just not useful. That's
my experience with clip-on lenses, because I've got, and you actually hooked me up with what
I gave you that because I really didn't care about it because of that.
So, like they've got like this just big honkin' flower, which I think this might be manufactured in the same place as some of the Moment lenses that Marquez was reviewing. It's a lot to carry with you. They get lost, they get scratched, you get fingerprints on them. Anytime you degrade the glass in front of your camera, you're going to have degradation in your visual quality. But the one thing that I have really enjoyed using are macro lenses. So a little lens that increases or decreases the minimum focusing distance to your camera. Those are really fun to play with. But again, it's just that.
Yes, those are
useful. It's just that, though. It's a very niche case. It's not something that I keep this kit with me around just so that I can have that one lens out of 4. It's like, I think like, hey, I want to go take some flower macros. I'll bust out that one lens that I keep a hold of. I'm really torn, because I still like my favorite dual camera strategy is Huawei's, where you've got 2 cameras that are focused on the same field of view, and they're just doing different things with color and light. But if we're talking about changing the focal length, I still feel that the wide angle is the better approach. I was really shocked looking at photos from the iPhone, from the OnePlus 5, and from the LG G6 at full zoom. The G6 wasn't that far behind in terms of that crop zoom, and the visual quality was about the same. I mean, you're not going to get great shots at the far end of a camera zoom just because you're cropping out data. Yeah. So for me, I tend to prefer the wide over the zoom, but for my core photography, I like, color and monochrome as or grayscale as my favorite way for just general shots.
No, I continue drifting back to the P10 just because of that monochrome. It's funny. It's not until I did the After the Buzz that I was like, crap, I need colored photos on this thing. All I did. So, I live in a third world country, which is not really that pretty. And it's just amazing how black and white photography can make even the dullest places beautiful. And that's the main reason why I use it. And New York can be very dull in certain spots as well. And so again, I have to agree with you. Like, my favorite camera combination of LG, mainly because again, I rely on video, and so I love using that secondary wide angle lens for video particularly. But in the case of photography, oh my God, Huawei. No room for comparison.
Well, and especially like, New York in black and white, you can always make that
It's
look
gorgeous. You remember those shots that we took for the Samsung event at night when we went to walk outside? Like, dude, like the other time I was going through photos, just flicking around for the After the Buzz. I'm like, oh my God. So I found all these like really beautiful shots that I took at night in black and white. And I was like, God, I need to post these. Like, they're just gorgeous. There's no room for comparison.
Yeah, some good stuff. I mean, again, like that's how nerdy we were after the Samsung event. We were walking around with a G6 and a P10, like at what, 2 in the morning around Times Square.
Yeah, we're looking for food.
Yeah, we were starving. That may be one of the best pizzas I've ever eaten. Let's wrap this up. There's one more question here. I'm going to try and condense this from Trevor. Basically, Trevor's asking about the price creep. So we've seen a lot of price creep on premium flagship phones, but now we're seeing it on the OnePlus 5. We can speculate that the OnePlus 5 and the R11 share a frame for some cost savings. That the manufacturing lines aren't completely retooled between those two different phones. But, we're seeing from the OnePlus 3 at that $400 price point, the OnePlus 3T, we saw a price bump there. OnePlus 5, we see another price bump there. Let me see. Do you think that this trend will continue? Will they end up like the Nexus, eventually matching the price of phones that used to deride for being more expensive? I certainly don't see them backing down the price at any point. So, is this going to be a crimp on the enthusiast markets where a brand comes up by being a cost-effective flagship replacement, but then every generation they get more and more expensive along the way?
I think that OnePlus is going to need to, at some point, either keep the old generation OnePlus for an extra year and sell it at a more aggressive price point. And because, I mean, these phones, like 6 gigabytes of RAM on the OnePlus 3T, I mean, that phone was ahead of its time. There is nothing wrong with that phone staying in the market for another year, which is the whole Apple way of doing things. I feel that it's something that will continue, but I'm really sad with the fact that OnePlus. What was the OnePlus that was a smaller phone and that was less expensive?
Oh, the OnePlus X.
The OnePlus X. I hate the fact that experiment failed. I feel that was the best mentality. Let's have an entry-level phone that's affordable, but that's also sort of powerful to a certain degree. Right. And let's have another like the Vanguard flagship. But we're also going to be more aggressive because people, whether we like it or not, sure, the phone is growing in price, but the problem is all phones are growing in price. Like, think about it. A Galaxy S8 is $750.
Yep.
$750. Like, that is a lot of money for a phone. So, so long as the other flagships continue growing in price, and now we're hearing rumors of the iPhone 8 costing $1,000, and we have the Galaxy S8 Plus costing nearly $900. I think that's, this just gives OnePlus leeway to continue playing with the price tag as well. That's just the way it's going to be. So I think that OnePlus should consider leaving the old phone for another year, just to cater to the people that still want a really powerful phone with good support. But then they should continue pushing the bar with the Vanguard, flagship. That's my opinion.
Well, and I think it's an opportunity for other companies too. Like, I know a lot of people have been complaining about the Alcatel Idol 5S, and in that it's a big retreat that they didn't try and make it a more powerful phone. Like, they tried to make the 4S more premium. And you're like, there's this big gap in the market where they could take a step back from all of their competitors of last year. I don't think Alcatel knew what they were in for opposite the Honor 8 and the Axon 7 and the OnePlus 3 and 3T, and they got hammered. So now to go back to what made the OnePlus 3 such an interesting phone, I think is a compelling move from a business strategy standpoint. We'll have to see if it pays off for them. But I think we're all just going to be what I think consumers should be prepared for is it's not only can we compete by putting in like a really hot processor, is that we're demanding more and more of every device: lifestyle, durability, camera tech, battery tech, recharging tech, the accessories in the box. Everything is getting feature creeped up to higher price points, just at the time that I think we're also going to see an international market that is going to become crazy competitive around things like batteries, home batteries, solar batteries, car batteries. This is going to put double pressure on the phone market, and I would wholly expect to see prices at every part of the smartphone tier rise because of that.
No, and I think I love the point that you're making, mainly because I'm going to ask this to everyone. Number one, in favor of the Idol 5S, I'm sorry, can you please name any other phone at a $200 price point that looks that good? Number one. And then in the case of the OnePlus 5, please give me an example of any $400 phone that includes things like dash charging, or where you have options like amazing audio quality, like what you've experienced, Juan. I feel that they're still struggling with their camera experiment. I feel that doing telephoto was a mistake. Again, I think they should have. Not everything has to look like an iPhone or mimic the iPhone, please.
Yeah.
Like seriously, I feel that there are, Apple has failed in certain strategies. For me, one of them has been this dual camera approach on the iPhone 7 Plus. I mean, it's not the best solution. I think that there are smarter things that can be done, like the portrait mode doesn't even work well in low light. There are so many things that could have been done with another type of approach to camera technology. And so, but going back to the point of defending these products, I feel that OnePlus gives you a lot of bang for your buck. I mean, what is the price of those bullet headphones, Juan? It's like $20 or $30.
Yeah, I think so. I wanted to say they were 25, but yeah, it's somewhere in between 20 and 30.
$5. And when you gave me those bullet headphones, you were like, dude, you need to listen to these. You're not going to believe how good they sound. And I was like, okay, fine, you're the audio expert, shoot. All right. And I'm regretting that I forgot them in New York. They are really good. And so how many companies give you all that bang for your buck? I'm not complaining about OnePlus's strategy. I think they're doing great.
Yeah, I think to Trevor's point, he was referencing a conversation I had with Erica Griffin about the sharing the frame with the R11, and I think OnePlus probably wouldn't have done this dual camera experiment if they weren't on the same shell as what Oppo was doing with the R11. I think it probably would have been something closer to what we saw with the OnePlus 3. Maybe even just a really good single camera. Fight Samsung on their own ground. Why do dual if you can have one really killer epic high quality camera? But it is one of those things that I really feel like for us who are enthusiasts, we should be conscious, not only conscious, but I think we should be prepared for this hitting our wallets harder and harder. Because another thing too is, a lot of these companies need to pivot. Unfortunately, if you go after enthusiasts first, you don't make as much money. Yeah, exactly. You don't make as much money until you pivot and find some mainstream success, or you die, So I think, the move that we saw from OnePlus is probably a step in them looking to court a broader audience than what they can achieve with just, the Android junkies jumping on for a bargain, because we're kind of the worst customers for a company like that.
We talked with Mark of the Tech Alter. And,
Tech Alter had a great look at that. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a very, very controversial kind of thing. But I mean, even sometimes people themselves admit that they get a little too vitriolic sometimes. But in any case, I think my 2 cents on it all is that OnePlus is trying to, Oppo and BBK and whatever back chain is linking them to the investments. They want to see some margin coming out of a low margin or no margin company now, and this is their pivot. Carl Pei is using this as an opportunity to say that they want to produce the best smartphones they can, period, and forget about value. That's not important to us anymore. Well, I mean, it just so happens that the enthusiasts are younger, they make less, and this economy, all these economies are not giving them the monies that would be optimal.
Well, and I feel that OnePlus is a victim of its own success. When your media messaging is never settle or flagship killer, like, you're going to court an audience of people who want that. That they want to spend less on something which is just as good as what you're claiming the competition is. But I want to wrap this up real quick because I know we've kept you a little longer than I expected to, Jaime. Just if we could get a little 411 on Pocketnow Spanish. That this experiment launched a couple weeks ago. Tony came on to talk about it during our anniversary podcast, and you were an integral part of getting this up and running. And I was hoping you could share some thoughts on reaching a new market and a new language.
This Pocketnow en Español is literally a labor of love. It's been a project that we've been discussing for many years, and actually the backbone, like if you look at how long we've been posting behind the scenes and just creating the backbone of the Spanish website, it's actually pretty much a year of work, because we didn't want to just launch something and for it to be empty. And so we've got my buddy Sam, who's actually working in the Spanish area. Sam is an awesome guy. He's like a multifaceted geek. He's a musician. He's a tattoo artist. He's a geek like very few people that I know. But he's also an English teacher, and he's got certain expertises that are really interesting, and he brings this comic-y flavor. Like Espanol is going to have its own approach. We're not really trying to, because Latin America and the Spanish culture is very different to the English culture. Like even our jokes are not funny in English, and even English jokes are not funny in Spanish. So it'll actually take a very different approach, and we're actively working. Just to give you an idea, obviously this is a project that is an investment. It's going to take time for it to take off, and so we're asking everybody to provide us as much feedback as they can. We are definitely going to take the plunge on video, but obviously we've made an investment on the text website. And so doing that in video, where I do want to be part of that and actively be part of that, obviously requires the fact that I need more time.
Yeah.
I need more time. And,
don't we all?
Yeah, and right now it's going to take a while. We have a few approaches that we want to do, because we actually do want to do something a little unique on video that's not being done anywhere else. And that's really the purpose. I feel that there is a niche of approaches that are not being served in Spanish. And it's the main reason why actually, because obviously I'm the only one that speaks Spanish in the team before Sam. And so it was like, okay, am I willing to take upon this? And I'm like, yes, I do. Every single time that I've been approached by people, it's like, why don't you do it in Spanish? Like, it's like we Latinos have this thing where we don't like to be whitewashed. For example, we don't like for our heritage to be whitewashed, and so everybody's like, you have no accent in English. Like, why don't you do something in Spanish and stuff like that? And I'm like, we want to. It's just doing things in Spanish is not easy. These projects grow really quickly, but it's funny, but advertisement in English actually is more, it pays better in English than it does pay in Spanish. So building this project is going to require support. It's going to require support from the community. It's going to require we ask that you please, let us know this Pocketnow en Español is about you. Trying to serve the Spanish community, and we want to do it in a very unique way, but we will need your support and viewership. Read what we do. That will obviously be part of the how do you call it in I don't even know how you call it in English. Eso va a ser la punta de lanza, is the way you say it in Spanish. That's going to be the point of reference for us to launch what we want to do in video. Obviously, video requires a lot more complexity, and we're a very small project right now. So yeah, we invite you to be part of this. Again, this is not something that we're just experimenting with and just throwing a finger out. No, we know what we want, and we know what we want to do, but it all depends on your support initially. And thank you. We received very nice acceptance at the beginning, and again, it's going to take more time. but I can't wait. I can't wait for everything that's coming. I can't wait to have more time to actually do what we want to do.
Right.
But so far, so good. It's been really nice.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because even just the early content that I've been able to interact with, like, because I can't speak Spanish for shit, but I still read it well enough from my high school education of different foreign languages, and it's already fun content to interact with. So I can't wait to see what you guys have coming up next.
And by the way, everybody, the memes of the day on our Facebook page, that's actually Sam. I mean, that guy is just hilarious. So for all of you that were thinking that these were going to turn into the bad jokes that I use in the daily, they're not.
You still have to watch the daily for those bad jokes, and there are going to be different bad jokes for
I just find it so funny when people are like, I find it so funny when people are like, dude, your jokes are terrible, and I'm like, dude, do you know what it's like to come up with a different joke every day for 5 years?
No,
5
they don't.
years.
Well, and also, I mean, that's what I love about, when I make a joke about my stumpy thumb, or, how I wrap up my videos. I mean, the same thing for you. It's like, I can tell almost instantly from the comments, like, oh, that's someone who's seen more than 2 of my videos, because they know what I'm doing when I'm saying megapixel as opposed to megapixel. Like, I need to be able to have some fun producing this content too, and there are these ideas and these callbacks that I like to come back to. And I feel like for the Pocketnow Daily, the joke is sort of its own entity now. It needs to be a part, and it probably needs to not be the best joke ever for it to do its job.
I think it's funny, because when I came up with the first daily and the whole. It's funny because I showed it to Brandon, who was back then the owner of Pocketnow, and he's like, why a joke? And I'm like, well, because I look like people's dad, and I need to break the ice somehow.
Right. And a dad joke is
to break the
best
ice
way to do that
somehow. That was important.
Well, Jaime, I really want to thank you for jumping on to chat the news this week. Again, it was really important to me that we got you on, because I'm really excited about this Pocketnow Spanish experiment. So I'm hoping that again that it's resonating, that we're finding people to engage with it, because again, it's only through that kind of idea of community that these projects can survive. All at the same time that people keep saying that they want new things, or they want new content, or they want a fresh approach, and then we try to do those things, but then oftentimes they're not given really enough time to find to find their audience, or to find their footing. This is one that's important to me, to make sure that we keep it going.
Indeed.
Yeah, definitely. No, I from experience, I actually tried to start a few Spanish projects many years ago in the Brandon times, and dude, like, it takes time. People have no idea how much work. Like, it's funny, really. Oh my God! So it's funny how much people underestimate, the work we do. It's at some point I had a few friends that were like, "Oh, why don't we start something together? And it's going to be us, and you're going to teach us what to do." And I'm like, "Sure, I'll do it." But, once they started doing the work, they're like, dude, you make this look easy, but it's not.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
And I'm like, no.
That's the best compliment, actually, is like, we make it look easy.
But, it's not. It's really not. Putting a video together, writing an article, like, it takes a lot of thought. It takes a lot of time, and it requires a lot of alone time.
Yeah.
It takes away from, time with our families. Sometimes we've got deadlines with so many videos to do, and, sometimes it's 3 a.m., 4 a.m. People don't know this. And then they're like, oh, look at the bags on your eyes, and look at this guy. You look like crap. And I'm like, have you any idea how much I've been doing? And, we never say these things, but yes, the Pocketnow in Español project is that. It has been a lot of hours of putting this together. So yes, are we expecting it to blow up? We hope so. I mean, we hope that people like it, because we take people's time seriously. That's one thing that I've been saying in Pocketnow for many years. We take people's time seriously. We don't just come out here and just push something because we want to test the waters. No, there's been a lot of thought into many of the things that we do. Like projects like your projects, like the real camera review. I mean, how much time does it take you to make a real camera review? I mean, it's a crap load of time, dude. And I have so much admiration for your talents in particular, and so people don't know this. People just watch the video and they criticize it in the comments and everything. We grow a thick skin around it, but it doesn't change the fact that we strive to bring as much excellence to the products we do as possible.
Agreed. And I think that's the perfect note to go out on, gents, because we've run a lot longer than I thought it was, but it was a good conversation, and we don't have you on enough, when we get you, it's like, well, we're going to be
when you get me. You don't invite me. Just admit it.
Dang, making this not a... Oh, right. There you have it, folks. Another episode of the Pocketnow Weekly has come and gone. This show is over, but the conversation continues on Twitter, where you can find Jaime as Jaime_Rivera. Jules is @PointJules, and I'm humbly @SomeGadgetGuy. Pocketnow is around the web on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Google+, YouTube, and our home site, pocketnow.com and es.pocketnow.com. We're basically everywhere. Shows like this cannot exist without your support. Sharing the weekly with your friends who love mobile technology, and by dropping reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever else podcast reviews can be left. Once again, we want to thank this week's sponsor, Shutterstock. They're helping us keep the lights on here, helping you finish your projects. Definitely check out that promo code, get yourself a deal. But ultimately, there would not be a show if it weren't for our listeners and subscribers who have kept us on the air since 2012. The Pocketnow Weekly will be back next week with all kinds of delicious technology goodness. So make sure you tune back in.